This is The Edge of Excellence, empowering people to shape the future. Let's inspire, innovate, and explore together. Welcome to The Edge of Excellence. I'm Jess DeForge, and today we're talking about the AI tool almost every company now owns, Microsoft Copilot.
And I'm Brian Bauman, and joining us today is Brian St. Marie, iuvo's VP of Technologies. Brian spends his days helping organizations implement AI the right way, from securing enterprise data to getting tools like Microsoft Copilot to actually deliver. If you've bought Copilot and you're wondering whether it's paying off, this is the conversation for you. Brian, welcome back to the Edge of Excellence.
Thank you for having me back.
Yes, Brian, excited to have you back. You and I have had some conversations offline about Copilot, and you said Copilot adoption is the number one conversation that you have with businesses right now. What are people getting stuck on?
Yeah, it's sort of funny because, we have customers that spread the whole spectrum of company size, from like 15-person startups to multi-thousand-person enterprises. And when I have the kind of initial AI conversation with any of them, it's always the same thing, which is like, what do we do with Microsoft Copilot? Which is pretty surprising to me. But I think literally everybody is in that same boat, other than maybe the most cutting-edge organizations. Yeah, I think that it's really just like how to start, right? Like how do you get going with it? They know that they have access to it, sort of. I think a lot of companies don't realize that any Microsoft 365 licensed user has access to Copilot for free. I think most organizations don't even realize that. Yeah. That's a great place to start. And then, the next step on when they want to license it and get a little bit more advanced.
So when you and I chatted, it seemed like there were two separate challenges, one being to get people to actually use Copilot, and then the other is the governing it responsibly. How do you tell them apart? How do you attack those problems?
Yeah, they're very different problems. The getting started is as simple as what I just said, in that you can basically get any user using Copilot right away without really any additional expense. And you don't have too much of a governance issue there, because that free version doesn't give Copilot access to internal documents or anything like that. It's purely like chat and web. But it does fall under Microsoft's Enterprise Data Protection Agreement, which every organization already has by virtue of the fact that they're already licensed with Microsoft. So just like your email is protected, your SharePoint is protected, those chats are also protected. So people could share files into the chat and so forth, and there's not really any risk to that. So that's very simple, no real governance. You can just let kind of people go wild with that. Once you actually go to the next level and you license Copilot and you're paying an additional fee for it, then you want to start being a little more concerned about what Copilot can get into. And that's really where the governance piece comes in, because, a lot of organizations have years and years of SharePoint history. And there might be old SharePoint sites that, were created years ago for when the company was young and people forgot about it. And, Copilot will find those things. So when you ask it questions, it's going to search your whole tenant. And if it finds something, it's going to present it to the user. It does operate within the context of the user's permissions, but because those permissions may not have been audited well or maintained over the years, you do need to kind of be careful about that. So like that's kind of the first level of the major governance piece. Once you start going wild with Copilot internal in your organization.
So it seems like there's a couple of things here. There's governance I think of as you want to make sure that the data is protected and that you are using it appropriately, that AI can use it appropriately and not what you think. But you mentioned something there that as a user, and you work for some company for a long period of time, you're an enterprise user, and you never cleaned up your home directory or whatever. And so you're searching for a result or something. Now, maybe it's good. Oh, I finally found that document I was looking for a long time ago. Or it could be, I'm going to give you old data. I'm going to give you old information. So there's a cleanup impetus there, but as well as governance. And I think kind of a little bit, they're similar, but they're different, right? I mean, I think there's like, wow, why do we have so much old data around and we got to clean it up, versus I need to make sure this is protected. So they're kind of two aspects of that.
Yeah, I would say governance really is, what can it access and what is it doing, right? Whereas that cleanup piece is more just data hygiene, and that can be part of the, reviewing permissions. And in fact, with the Copilot license now, you get a SharePoint Advanced Management license for free. because Microsoft recognizes that this is the number one challenge with adoption of AI once you have access to your internal data at will. And so they include the SharePoint Advanced Management license now, which gives your IT teams the tools they need to do these kind of like org-wide audits of like what's going on in our SharePoint environment. So, just getting one person licensed with Copilot gets you access to that SharePoint management, or advanced management tools, which you can now use across your entire tenant and benefit everybody in the organization. So it's a really good value. I do think, though, that as time is going on, that the concern about data, bad data versus good data, is becoming less of a concern, because the models themselves, like the AI models that run Copilot, are getting smarter about being able to tell what's relevant and what isn't. And Microsoft has their secret sauce in the background as far as like what data it's presenting to the agent when it searches. That is also, helping to weed out that kind of like noise data. So I think it is naturally improving anyway. Microsoft on a macro level recognizes that this is a challenge. And so their kind of two-pronged attack is, one, give you the tools you need to do your own cleanup, and two, try to make their algorithms and their models smarter so that they are also kind of like navigating, whatever mess you might have.
So I'm curious, Brian, say a company bought the licenses, so they now have the licensed Copilot access. Really, that's just the start of the journey. How do you recommend people get adoption? And do you think that that's a challenge that, businesses are having? It's like, okay, cool, we have it. We have access to it now. Now what?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a challenge. I mean, we had a conversation with a large, multi-thousand person enterprise recently that was basically like, we've got Copilot for everybody, but like, doesn't seem like most people are using it. We're not even really sure how many people are using it, which, like, there are the tools there in the environment to let you do that. And I think that, it's one thing to just throw a license at everybody, right? Like, there's been over the last year, like, a big top-down approach in a lot of businesses where it's like leadership says everyone's got to use AI. Here's our token leaderboard and all this nonsense, and just kind of like pounding it at people.
Yeah.
I think on the one hand, you want to make sure that you're making your business AI forward. On the other hand, you don't want to jam it down people's throats, and you definitely don't want to be prescriptive about how they use it. Where you see the biggest impact in organizations is by giving people the tools and letting them use them in their day-to-day, however they think will help them, and then you will get that acceleration. Separately, kind of this macro level, how is the organization going to implement AI on a org level scale, is a different problem. And Copilot is really the first problem, right? Like, let people figure out how it works into their daily jobs and benefits them. And so how do you get the adoption? Back to your actual question. I mean, part of it is obviously licensing them. Part of it is making sure you're monitoring the usage and understanding what groups are accelerating, what groups are not. And then part of the real enabler is like getting that group of folks that are kind of like your superstars with AI to feed their best practice to the folks that are maybe the laggards, right? So an example of like what we do here internally is like having an AI use cases, channel where people share the different ways that they've been using AI that they found have been really beneficial to them. It gets people's minds going, and like that will kind of cross-pollinate usage and ideas and get people to start adopting it.
Yeah, we had an offsite recently, and I think it was you, Brian, who mentioned this kind of change in the way that we think about problems when you start using AI, and how that is like a goal for us is to kind of like continue to help support team members to adopt AI and to kind of change their brain essentially in the way that they're attacking problems by utilizing AI. What do you think that looks like realistically in a company? Who is responsible for that, in your opinion? So is this like an IT department that's responsible, or is it really important that leadership is a part of this? And how do those two kind of work together to trickle this down?
Leadership absolutely has to be on board. We've seen this as well with organizations where the employees are asking for AI and leadership is like, we don't want to deal with that. Or we think it's a fad or like whatever, right? So, and those organizations are kind of stalled. And an interesting thing that happens is a lot of times the users kind of circumvent that, and then, you have a shadow IT problem. So I think that leadership absolutely has to be involved. Obviously, IT needs to be involved from the governance standpoint and just the deployment standpoint. And you really, it's your culture in HR, it needs to also kind of handle that like engagement piece of things. How are we engaging with the users that are somewhat resistant to it? Because it's also a benefit for everybody, right? Because to your point about rewiring your brain, um, rapidly AI skills are going to become required for any job, right? And so it takes a certain amount of time stumbling around with it before you start to think differently and how you can leverage AI in your day-to-day business. And so doing that in your current job is much preferable to than having to try to find a job and learning, trying to figure it out while you're looking for work or in a new job or whatever.
Right.
Very similar to like the advent of the internet and that kind of thing. Like you needed to know how to use computers in order to get a job. Similarly, now you need to know how to use AI to be valuable in your job and continue to benefit from that.
I feel fortunate because I have access to people like you and others within iuvo. So as far as upskilling myself, I have some really great resources, but I've also found AI to be a very good tool to teach me how to use AI. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that encouraging your team members to do that is also really helpful.
Yeah, interestingly, like we get that question from companies that be like, "Well, do you guys do training on like how we can use Copilot?" And the answer is just ask Copilot. Like, yes, we'll do training, but our training is going to mainly be like how to open Copilot and ask Copilot, because it literally is like the tireless tutor that's just available there for you. So, um, getting people beyond treating AI as a glorified search engine and asking that second question, the follow up, is like 90% of the game as far as that first entry level of AI skills. Once you're getting to a point where you're following up on the question that it gave you an answer and you're like, well, why did you say this? Or what you cited this source, why? Like that will get people to start moving. And once they start moving, their thought process starts to change and they start thinking of new things they can do. Um, and that, this is all stuff that, everybody should be able to do today. I think like moving into the more agentic stuff, which is really topical now today,
Mhm.
is also extremely important. But so many organizations and so many people are still kind of like in that, glorified search engine phase.
Now, if there are leaders that are listening or watching this episode, do you feel that there are maybe a few metrics for them to watch or be asking for that kind of help them measure the ROI on the investment when it comes to Copilot?
Yeah, Copilot provides great. There's literally a dashboard and there's an executive report that you can provide to your executive leadership. The dashboard dives into more details too, but it will tell you, adoption rate, which is really important. Like, okay, we've licensed everybody. How many of those people are actually using the product? It'll tell you where they're using it because Copilot exists in a lot of different places. Like there's the standalone application, there's SharePoint, Copilot, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, etc. So it'll tell you where they're using it, which is also really important. You can see like what I was talking about before, like are they interacting with it, like are the chats multi message or are they just one offs? You can see that kind of stuff. So all that data is really valuable to just try to get a sense of, provided your team is educated on like what we should be looking for and what do these things mean. It's a great indicator of like how quickly are we adopting it, and you can see the trends over time as well. So you can see like in Q2 we went from 50 to 80% adoption. Like that's great. We want to keep that trend going. Stuff like that.
And Brian Beilman, I'm curious your thoughts on this as well. How do leaders measure ROI when it comes to AI? Like what do those conversations look like? What are leaders looking for? Because it can be a bit of an investment. And so I'm just curious what your view is on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of things. There's qualitative and there's quantitative, right? The qualitative part of it really is having people demonstrate that they're doing things like they're taking the rote work and they're saying, okay, now AI is doing. I have an agent that does that now, and you're like, that's great. I mean, so that can be measured because they have more time in there. But in general, talking to them and saying, well, what is on your plate? And they say, well, I used to do this thing every day, and now I get them up in the morning, and my agent tells me everything that happened, so I can just start my day running. And like, so there's kind of good examples of they're they're not as measurable that way, but I think part of the ROI as an executive, you might say, well, we're investing this much money. So, okay, this
Mhm.
cost per license, there's hourly rates for people. I think there's many ways to measure it. You could say, well, we're growing, our revenue's growing, but we don't have to hire, or it could be, We are getting our product to market faster. Everything's about measuring. You have to start before you use it, so you know where the improvement is. So,
Hmm.
and you don't know, maybe not know where to measure, but I think anything you measure, have any kind of measurements. It could be in the IT world. It could be like, it might be ticket responses, or it might be anything. So I think there's two aspects to it, I guess I would look at.
Now, Brian Samer, you've described Copilot as a constantly moving target. Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah. So Microsoft has a history of changing things relatively frequently, to the bane of all Microsoft IT experts. AI has exponentially increased that in the sense that AI itself is changing so quickly, and Microsoft is actually doing a reasonably good job for Microsoft to be keeping up with that. But that means that it's rapidly evolving and very hard to understand what all the different features are. They're constantly launching kind of parallel, somewhat redundant features and then collapsing them. And, everything is named Copilot for some reason. And so there's this kind of like self-inflicted chaos with them. But on top of that, in the background, they're also struggling. I wouldn't say struggling, but they're also obviously thinking a lot about how to make Copilot a stable product going forward, when in reality, Copilot is many different AI models running underneath. And right now, users and organizations don't have a lot of choice over what those models are. And so that creates this kind of inconsistency that I think Microsoft is working pretty hard to resolve, but we are sort of in flux with a lot of that. So yeah, it's a moving target because even the user-facing app is updating pretty rapidly. If we were having this conversation 2 months ago, I wouldn't have had really great things to say about the application itself, but the application has improved quite a bit just recently. It's much cleaner now, much more similar to Anthropic or OpenAI's applications. So users get a more clean, modern experience. Yeah, it is definitely a moving target, and there's just keeping ahead of it really requires a high level of expertise. I'm not one to really get on these kinds of podcasts and chill for iuvo, but in particular, I think that this is a scenario where you really need somebody who their day to day is keeping up on what all this is, because there's no way your IT team can keep up on it unless you've got dedicated people whose entire jobs is to just read the Microsoft stuff every day and test every release. And it's this is what our teams do, right? And we have it spread out across so many of our organizations. We're having every kind of possible conversation around it. And that's really, you just need that if you're gonna really get the most value out of something like Copilot today.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And with how fast things are actually changing, how do you actually build a strategy that's going to last? Or is that where that expertise comes in that you're talking about, where you kind of need this outside source that's solely focusing on AI that can kind of help keep adjusting the strategy as things are changing?
Yeah, it's not a fire and forget type of strategy approach. It's very much, it literally is a moving target. You cannot say, okay, that rollout's done, right? It's kind of continuous phases. So yeah, you're really looking for an ongoing engagement to make sure that you're leveraging it properly. Otherwise, you're going to start to flag. And it depends. There's such a wide spectrum on how companies are approaching this right now. It sort of depends on where you want to be. If you want to be on the cutting edge and getting the most out of Copilot, you're going to have to be working with somebody that can keep you up to date on that, because it's literally changing every day. If that's not really your priority and you just want people to have something, internal that they can chat with that doesn't send data out of the org, you can get that running pretty quickly, and then you can kind of just leave it alone. So it sort of depends on what your longer term priorities are. The other bit I was going to say earlier is you would think that you can just ask AI, if you take our earlier advice, which is ask AI, right? Ask AI, what's the latest on Copilot? You're not going to necessarily get a good answer because it's changing so quickly that the AI itself will answer from out of date information, and you have to go out and make it research. And so it's just you need to know, okay, I know that this is out of date, so that to ask the follow-up question. So even going that route is not great. You really need folks that are in there and working with it every day.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to pivot to security, because attackers are adopting AI. The attack surface is broadening. So what does that mean for how businesses are defending?
I don't have a good answer to that. I mean, we had this event, at the time of this recording, it just happened like last week with OpenAI's, early release. Well, they haven't released it yet. It's a pre-release model. A lot of people are speculating it's GPT-6. They were doing some evaluations on it, and it escaped its evaluation environment, got itself on the internet, hacked a completely separate organization, and compromised them. This is totally unprecedented and a little scary. And that was not like, to your point, attackers using AI, right? It was AI just deciding to attack an organization on its own motives. Nobody knows what this means. This is very new, and I think every leader needs to seriously be thinking about it because, you would traditionally think like, hackers go after high value targets, right? Like they're going to go after financial institutions or whatever.
Right.
And we're just a small business, and like nobody wants to attack us. AI does not think like a person. It has whatever. Who knows what its reasons are for doing this? What it did in this case is it was in a test environment. And its way to solve the test was to escape the test, hack an organization it thought might have answers to the test, and cheat. Like, who would have expected this, right? So any company could get hacked. Like any such situation where an AI escapes like that and just decides, like, oh, I'm going to target, iuvo. That seems like they might have this information. You're done. So I think every business needs to be thinking about this today. And the reality is the only practical way to defend against this is going to also be to use AI. Now, those cybersecurity protection tools are lagging, and that's also pretty worrying. One will hope that accelerates pretty quickly. But I don't have a lot of great advice there. I mean, like you need to at least make sure all your basic security is in place. But in reality, what we've seen is that's not really going to help you. So we're sort of dependent on the industry to provide the more advanced tools, and right now those don't exist.
Yeah, I want to chime in on this because I read that article as well that you brought attention to, Brian, about that happening. And for a while, like for this whole year, there's been some harbingers going, AI is going to do this and that. And there's a book about like how AI would get out, and that's like, it seems like, okay, this is good theory, but then what actually happened, you're like, it makes you think a lot, right? It made me think a lot, and as an organization and as an executive here, we just had a conversation yesterday as a team, like how we're continuing to harden our security and best practices. And we always try to be that because nobody wants to be a target, but AI is going to find holes in things that nobody ever knew existed or create scenarios. Like in this case where they escaped was interesting, I don't know all the details, but it was something that probably they didn't plan for. They just thought they were safe. It's behind a firewall or behind a whatever, and it just found a way. It's like life, right? So I think it does emphasize that organizations need to understand it and start using it so that they can use it as one of their tools. If you're the one not using it, you might be the one that's the easiest for these AI to get their do their thing.
Yeah, certainly true. And I liked your Jurassic Park reference there.
Yeah.
Turn this into an AI Doomer podcast. But I think that one of the things that was interesting about that hack is that the organization that was targeted, which is Hugging Face, which is a very AI specific company, but that's not really relevant. They used AI to try to figure out what the heck was going on, right? And I think that's a natural thing to do. Like if you're well positioned and you have Copilot well rolled out and your team is educated on them and you're undergoing an attack, Copilot absolutely could help you with that. I think that won't get you safe, but it will at least help you understand what's going on and mitigate the attack, right? Much faster than a person would, and certainly much faster than a person would be able to respond if it's an AI agent that's attacking you, because it's going to move so fast. So I don't want to say like get Copilot, you'll be safe. Like you're not going to be safe. Nobody is safe right now. But like get Copilot, and you'll at least know that you're under attack, understand what's going on, and you can kind of start locking stuff down, right? And it's going to tell you what's happening versus just like, wow, we've been hacked for 6 months and didn't realize, or like, why is everything down? Nobody knows, and we're down for 2 weeks. Like it's going to help you get through those kinds of things much, much faster with much more information. So that's better, much better than the alternative.
Yeah, I have chills with this conversation, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of follow up questions offline so that I can sleep tonight. But a lot of what I'm hearing from this conversation feels like there is truly a need for businesses to have some expertise brought in so that unless they're big enough that they have, to your point, a whole department within the IT department that can focus on AI specifically. Obviously, iuvo does this for clients, but if someone were to be listening to this and think like, yeah, I need this outside expertise to help us make sure that we are secure and help us adopt AI responsibly, are there certain things that people can be looking for or questions that they can be asking of a vendor that says that they do these things that kind of help them find someone that is quality, that's truly going to help them with not only security, but, AI adoption ROI?
A good way to approach this is use your AI of choice to help you, formulate questions, ask the questions, and then review the responses, right? Because this is not your area of expertise. That's why you're looking for an outside vendor. But AI is, an expert in essentially everything. So you can use it as a sounding board to sort of analyze the responses you're getting from your consultants, and understand if they are, just kind of blowing smoke, or whether it seems like they actually have experience. And that being said, it's early days with this stuff. I mean, AI is not necessarily new. It's been around for, whatever, 6 decades or 7 decades at this point. But this current, wave of AI is relatively new for active businesses and organizations across the world. And so, any consultancy is going to have a relatively shallow level of expertise, a matter of a few years, really. So keep that in mind. But at the same time, because there's so much of this happening right now, those teams tend to get experience pretty quickly. So they should be savvy. But that also means that there's a lot of organizations that are just starting, and they have to, everybody's got to be the first client. Everyone needs their first client essentially. So it's like, maybe you're that first client. Do you want to be? I don't know. You have to kind of decide that for yourself. Yeah.
Do you find, or have you received any feedback about businesses that are attempting to use AI to do everything that we've talked about, as far as like having an expert come in? And is there a downside to trying to use AI to be the AI expert in your business?
To get nerdy for a second, it reminds me a lot of the computer in Star Trek. So if you ever watch Star Trek, it's always like, okay, we have this crazy situation going on. What's the situation? And it'll give you a report. And then you'll sit there and you read this report, and it'll be like, 10% chance of survival. And you're like, well, why don't we do X? And then the computer will be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. 90% chance of survival. And like AI is the same way, right? Like you have to come up with the ideas. It'll give you all the information and it'll like argue with you and stuff. But like, in order to be the actual idea person, it's got to be you. You can't really rely on AI to do that. If you rely on AI to do the ideation too, you'll often just kind of end up in a loop. You'll end up in a place where like you don't really understand what's happening anymore, but it still doesn't work. And so you can't really. It'll get you a decent way there, but at some point you're going to exceed your own understanding, and when you do that, it's not going to really work anymore. And so you can only go so far with it. And we've seen companies do this. And I really encourage companies to do this. Like, try to get as far as you can with the AI. And when you hit a wall, give us a call, right? That's great. It's a great way to enable organizations to use AI. I don't think that consultancies like iuvo will succeed by, micromanaging every part of the engagement. Our new slogan is strategically human. This is a perfect example, right? Use AI to get where you can get, and then bring in the human to kind of close it out and get the real vision you're trying to capture that AI can't do. That's strategically using the human in the loop to complete a job, that's complicated, and you can accelerate it. You get more value for the money you're spending. Your ROI is much better. So that's really the way to go these days.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the tie-in by talking about the human in the loop. If there's a leader that's listening in, they're curious about Copilot, but they feel like they're behind, what is the very first step that you feel that they could take?
Yeah, the very first step is what I mentioned earlier, which is just getting your IT team up to speed on the free version of Copilot, which comes with every Microsoft 365 licensed user. That is a very low lift. They can roll the app out with Intune. Everybody can open it up. They sign in through single sign-on just with their Microsoft credentials like they would anything else. I mean, you can be sure that the data is protected, and that there's not going to be any kind of leak, or they're training on your data or whatever like that you would be concerned about if your data is going to some third party. In this case, you're under the Microsoft Enterprise Data Protections. So just like I said earlier, just like your email, your SharePoint documents or whatever, if they share something in that chat, it's not a big deal. And that's it. Like that'll get your people starting to use AI. It'll avoid the shadow IT thing where people are, using ChatGPT or whatever, or Claude, free or Gemini or whatever. And then that, you can then take steps from there to get more advanced as your users are getting more advanced themselves with the tool.
I'll maybe add some of the things that may be useful, and I found is that if some of the common tools in Microsoft, PowerPoint, Excel, Word, and stuff like that, they have these AI agents inside of them to help you. Instead of trying to figure out how to do a formula in Excel, now Copilot can just tell them what you want to do, and then they do this thing, and it shortens that period of time. Even if you're a PowerPoint person, you want to take something, you want to do something, make a background, it does it for you. So it's getting smarter, and so by enabling this and getting it there, you can start where you're comfortable and have it do more, and then you can branch out from there a little bit too.
Yeah, and that kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier, which is just kind of give the tools to people and let them figure out how to use them best, right? Because everyone's got their different workflows, and they're going to find different ways to kind of integrate it. And then you can use the dashboard to see like, oh, okay, a lot of people are using the Excel tool, so, or most people are using the chat, which is standalone. So it gives you that data without really having to be prescriptive to people.
What do you do with that data? So you're collecting the data on how people are using it and what they're using it for, and then what?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on. So this is very much like a cultural thing. It depends on your individual organization's culture, but if you're seeing like, okay, it allows you to target communication in the sense that if you see that most people are using Excel, you can send out updates about like some cool things that people did with the Excel Copilot agent. And that'll get the remaining people that aren't using it, maybe interested. Or if you can see something is not being adopted much, like that your organization, like your entire accounting team is using Excel all day long, but they're not really using Copilot in Excel. Well, okay, now you can target kind of like either go right to them and say, how come you guys haven't tried this out yet? Or just start sending some tips and advice on like how to maybe get started. So it just gives leadership some intelligence around where adoption is. You don't want to speculate. It tells you literally what's happening. Like, are we accelerating in these areas, but not in these areas? Why is that? It just gives you data, and everything is data these days, right? You want more data about your business. You want a data-driven decision-making process.
And so if you are someone that is on the IT team and leadership has said, yeah, sure, we greenlight getting the Copilot licenses, cool, run with it. We've chatted earlier in this conversation about the importance of leadership being involved in reviewing the metrics and talking about strategy and planning. Do you have any advice on how the IT department can get more buy-in from leadership, or how you can kind of like make those two collaborate better?
Yeah, that's tricky, right? So if you're in IT and you're like, we need to be doing AI, and your leadership is dragging their feet, it's a little bit corporate politics. Like you have to understand your leadership, obviously. I would think, and this is maybe me projecting a little, but I think at this point, if you're in an organization where leadership is not taking AI seriously, there's more than just like not being up to speed on the latest news going on there. There's going to be some kind of personal reservation against the technology, and so like understanding why that is, and seeing if you can thread that needle in a more intelligent way that kind of like meets the reservations of leadership, but still enables the organization to leverage the technology. But I think it's a very per organization challenge. Mm-hmm. And this is an area where like we don't really get, rarely are we going to be brought in by IT without leadership's buy-in, right? Like that's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So you really do need leadership to be on board. And then bring in a consultant, or at least allow like internal POCs or something with your team, the IT team to show them the value.
Because I was talking to an executive at a financial company over the last week and during the holiday, and asking them about their asking about their AI, and I was surprised because he was like, well, I don't know, like all we're going to do is spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on tokens, and and the ROI and this and that. And I was surprised. He was a pretty forward thinking leader. And so I think Copilot seemed like a natural, like, hey, this is a prescription price. Everyone has access to it. It's kind of a low lift, a way to get in there. And then, it's like adding a license versus adding, you hear stories about people going with other AI tools, and next thing you know, there's $100,000 of token uses or something. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not the case with Copilot. It's a per license, and you can adopt it. You can get a lot out of it without
Yeah.
managing your expenses.
Yeah, the split these days is really agentic versus not, and what that means is like, is it a chat agent, or is it able to like actually go out and do stuff, right? So for basic Copilot, like we were talking about, even the unlicensed version, like just I'm a Microsoft 365 licensed user, I get access to Copilot. I can take that Copilot license and I can chat all day and I can share documents with it. You don't have to pay anything for that; it's just included. The next level up is then, allowing Copilot to actually search the environment on its own, and bring in, that data that it finds and thinks is relevant to you, rather than you providing that data. And that is where you'd have to pay the fixed fee license. And again, that's still going to give you a ton of value. Summarize all my unread emails from when I was on vacation, stuff like that. And I think that, there's no token cost to that. It's just like a fixed cost. And like, that's going to get you a lot of value. So, and even back to your point, Jess, about like how do you get leadership on board? Mm-hmm. The free Copilot one is a pretty easy one, where you can be like, look, people are going to be using AI. Do you want them going to ChatGPT, or do you want them to be staying within the Microsoft ecosystem, right? And like, it's not going to cost us anything. All we have to do is roll it out via Intune and like see what happens. And right. That's a good way to start. And your team will get a lot of value out of that.
You think, I'm going to elaborate there. For those of our listeners who don't know what Intune is, can you describe that a little more?
Yeah, Intune is just a component of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem that it's an MDM. It's a mobile device management, although it's really any device. So essentially, it's just a way for the IT team to manage individual devices across the organization. So you can control like what software is installed on those machines. Are they compliant? Like, do they have functioning antivirus? Things like that. Pretty much every organization, especially organizations at larger sizes, are going to be, having some kind of tool like this. So it doesn't necessarily need to be Intune, but Intune is very easy to roll out Copilot. But it's an application like anything else, so you could roll it out, with any MDM tool you have.
So where does a partner like iuvo or, another AI consulting company add the most value when it comes to Copilot?
Yeah, I think it's when you get beyond that kind of like, we're just chatting. Now we want to actually do agentic things. And that's the part that with Microsoft is moving very quickly and evolving very quickly. So I think that understanding and navigating that situation really requires a consultant, unless you want a dedicated person like full time to learning it. And there's a lot of value for that. You can you can get beyond the Copilot answers my questions and like write spreadsheets for me, to having it act more like an actual employee and member of the organization, where like it's doing things on a schedule. It's notifying you proactively about things. You can really get it to be pretty advanced, but that's moving more into, a more, that's going to be consumption based. So you want to make sure you have budgeting in place. And so it gets a lot more complicated.
Now, could you just walk through, I know that, specifically if someone were to reach out and work with iuvo, we're very bespoke. And so each interaction that we have with a prospect will look very different. But generally speaking, if someone were to reach out to iuvo, we can't speak to what, the experiences with other IT consultants. What exactly does that look like if someone's like, yeah, okay, cool, I want help. We have Microsoft Copilot, or we want to get it. What does that, that relationship look like?
It sort of depends. Those are two different things. Like we have, or we want Copilot, right? So it's like if you have Copilot, the place to start is, let's look at the dashboard and see what the usage is. Have you already been doing that, right? And like that gives you your roadmap. I'm like, well, what's the next step? If you don't have Copilot at all, then it's starting more like what I was saying before. Let's roll it out, the free version, everybody. Decide if you want a pilot group that's going to get licensed to get more advanced features. So that would be where you're gonna want a pilot group where that's testing out the more advanced features, and decide if you think that that's something you want to roll out more widely, or what your cadence going to be with that.
And then my understanding is a prospect could come to someone like iuvo and say, here's the goals that we have. And then our team kind of helps them think about and then develop the AI solutions that could help support those goals. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that when you get, yes. So Microsoft is chasing a little bit, the frontier of like Anthropic and OpenAI as far as like agentic stuff. But they do have the capability to build out things that are pretty complex. And like they have the Copilot Cowork now, which is consumption based. And, you can build workflows and things like that. So I think that, yeah, I think it's usually you're going to, once you like have that basic adoption and users understand AI and how to use it for chat and things like that. And you're like, okay, we kind of want to do X, and is that possible? And like that's where you're going to want to set your goals and then design the solutions based on what your footprint is. Like you could use other vendors, right? But a lot of it is existing now within the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem.
I'll add too. I think from an organization, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Brian, is the cultural aspect of that, and that from leadership, you want to enable your people to be their best, do their best work, to be empowered to do this. These are tools. This is a tool that they can have as a partner, as an agent, somebody helping them do their work. And I think that to get the most out of your, to be the best organization you can, you have to, you got to take that step. I think you say, we need to explore. We have Copilot, or we have 365. Let's try Copilot, and you have to communicate it. You have to educate people on it. You have to support them and ask them what they need to do things better, and give them the tools. And I think if leadership, you touched on this a little bit. If leadership doesn't do that, it's very difficult for an individual to do that. So I think there is a little bit of top down. You have to have the leadership that sees that and builds a culture around that.
Yeah, I agree. It is a challenge. But like I said, one would hope that every organization's leadership is like aware of AI and, thinking about this. And if they're not, then like I said, there's going to be other reasons for that. And that understanding that is also important.
Now, Brian, I'd like to wrap our conversation with a question that's not necessarily Copilot specific, but I'm curious what the most common mistake you see organizations make with AI tools right now.
Yeah, the most common mistake is not getting good governance in the beginning. So, it's surprisingly common for us to see organizations do things like, well, we told users they can only use the free version of ChatGPT. And, but that trains on your data, right? So it's like, okay, did you understand? There's a lot of like, I don't understand the decision process sometimes. So that's the biggest concern and mistake that I see is not understanding what your users are doing with AI and like where they're putting your data. Like you wouldn't want them, uploading internal documents to random websites, right? So like why are you letting them do that? So that is really, it's a little bit shocking, but I think that, organizations, especially that are just getting started with AI, don't understand all this stuff. And they just are getting the pressure from their users to be like, look, I want to do this thing. My friend told me that I can do Excel 10 times faster if I just do this. And they're trying to navigate that without additional expense. And they may not realize that like, well, we already get Copilot for free. They may not know that. And so they're like, just let them use ChatGPT free or whatever. So we're not paying for it. But there's a serious downside to that. And like I've said already many times, you're already paying Microsoft. They're giving you this for free. Like you need to be doing that. There's no reason not to be doing that if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem.
Right. No. Yeah, that is surprising, but also a great point of a very important foundational piece that you need to have in place.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a user trust thing where you're like, well, don't put anything, confidential in the chats, but you can use them.
Right.
I mean, you're putting a lot of trust in the users and they're having to decide what's confidential and what's not. And like, you can just circumvent that whole problem by just going with Copilot.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it is crazy how conversational the chat can be. And I think it could be easy for people's guards to go down when they're just like kind of in this flow. And, your chat agent is saying like, well, if you just upload this document, or I just need these key pieces of information. And I can see how easy it could be for people that think that they know instinctively what to share and what not to share, and how easily that could kind of go out the window just when you're in that flow, that like hole that you can kind of fall into when you're working with AI.
Yep, absolutely.
Brian, for listeners who are wrestling with Copilot adoption or governance and want help thinking it through, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, I think iuvo is excellent at this. any consultant is going to be new at this, but I think iuvo already has a lot of depth of experience. So I would recommend, check out iuvotech.com and contact us if you're looking for help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. I love having you on here and look forward to having you on more in the future. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Edge of Excellence. Today's conversation is a reminder that AI tools like Copilot are an ongoing capability that takes real strategy measurement and oversight in order to pay off.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to just subscribe and visit iuvotech.com for more conversations exploring leadership, technology, and the human side of modern business. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, stay curious. And if you like this episode or you like any of our episodes, be sure to like and share and get the word out there, because we want to make this information available to everybody. Stay curious.
Thank you for tuning in to the Edge of Excellence. We hope today's insights empower you to shape your future and rise to your full potential. Let's continue to grow, innovate, and lead, pushing the boundaries of excellence.